When was the first time you heard of Jeffrey Epstein? Apparently, it was way back in 2005 when he was originally arrested in connection with having sexually abused a young lady. And this was kind of the start of it all, I guess. And I vaguely recall hearing about him around 2010 or something like that, 2012. And then, of course, when he allegedly killed himself in 2019, we had quite a few news stories then. But then the story kind of went away, didn't it? We kind of forgot about it. And for years, there was a little talk here and there about, oh, what about the client list? I heard Courtney Love was on the list, or I heard, whatever, Trump, or I heard Clinton. All these rumors start circulating in sort of underground circles and alternative podcast circles. But as far as mainstream society was concerned, the whole thing kind of went away. And then then Trump got elected, and then somehow the whole thing blew up again as if it was a brand new story. And we had, I assume from public pressure, Pam Bondi, who's part of the Trump administration, made some very head-turning announcements about information they were going to release and when. And there was a series of confusing stories and remarks, confusing in the sense that we didn't really get what Pam Bondi said we were going to get right away. We keep getting these files that are kind of redacted and little bits of them, and then a flood of documents, and then people get angry about stuff being redacted. And then finally, like a couple of weeks ago, they released like millions of documents. And I haven't had a chance to look at them. I don't really have the time. I'm kind of tired of the whole story myself. But the news is shoving it in everyone's face. And there does seem to be a little bit of accountability finally happening. So on one side, I'm getting really tired of the story. But part of that fatigue, and I think a lot of you can relate, is that it just feels like nothing is ever getting done. It just feels like we're being given a bunch of bullshit. But I guess Prince Andrew was just arrested, I think, this morning. And you're hearing about various CEOs stepping down, and a lot of them in Europe, a lot of them in Britain. And so something's definitely going on here. So I figured this was a good topic to do a off-the-cuff episode about. Now, I was actually really pissed off when I saw Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, who are and were part of the FBI at the time, of course. I got really pissed off when I saw them stare right into the camera and say, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. That's the way it is. We know you don't like it, but that's just the truth of the matter. I don't think anyone believed it. But here's the frustrating thing, is that I don't really know, and you don't really know. It doesn't matter how strongly you feel about this topic, how much you think they're lying. And I feel like they were lying, but I don't really know. And I think the only thing that really explains the confusion surrounding the Epstein story is that there's a heavy-duty amount of narrative warfare going on. In other words, there are a lot of different forces out there trying to control what you and I believe about this incident. And so, of course, the mainstream media, whatever the story is, the question you always want to ask yourself is, what do they want me to believe? And what is the opposing viewpoint? And I don't just mean like a headline in Fox News when you're talking about the opposing viewpoint. I mean like research both sides with equal intensity. Don't just research that. There's this thing called confirmation bias. Okay, I've talked about this before. Say you really hate Jeffrey Epstein, and you probably have good reason to hate him. He seemed like a real scumbag. But I mean, just because you hate him doesn't mean he, abused your daughter. If someone accused him of abusing your daughter or abusing a girl just because they accused him doesn't mean he did it. In order to address the opposing viewpoint, you have to look at news sources that you may not like, or you may have to read the words of people you don't like. But if you're not willing to do that, that means you're not really interested in the truth. You're not interested in a balanced point of view. And a balanced point of view doesn't mean that there is no objective truth and then everything has two sides. I don't buy that one either. That's a bunch of bullshit. There is an objective truth almost every time. So if you haven't done it and you don't know much about Epstein, I would recommend just flip through the Wikipedia entry. It's kind of long, but if you just glance through it from beginning to end, and I know that Wikipedia is biased as well, but just going through the basic information about Epstein tells you a lot of things. First of all, he didn't get in trouble until 2005? And he was operating in finance since like 1976. So he was rubbing elbows and making deals and prominently involved in the lives of all kinds of elites and rich people for like 29 years before you or I even knew who he was, and before he was arrested for any of these crimes that we're talking about. So up to about 2003 to 2005, he was just a rich guy that you saw around. So any pictures you see of him, whether it's Les Wexner or Donald Trump or anyone else, these pictures were taken at a time where some of these people may have had their suspicions, but it was not really known that he was the scumbag that he is known to be today. So is it really fair to be like, yeah, this proves that, Trump was diddling children with Epstein? This picture doesn't prove anything. All it proves was that they had a conversation and they had some kind of rapport going on. But he was very rich. He had a rapport with a lot of people. In fact, he was a lot closer with Lex Wexner. Billionaire Les Wexner is being deposed in the Epstein Files probe. Have you heard about this? Have you even heard of Les Wexner? Victoria's Secret makes sexy clothes for young women. And what was Jeffrey Epstein into? Young women. I mean, there's a lot of smoke here. I mean, there's fire here. And yet, nobody's talking about Les Wexner. Who are they talking about a lot in connection with Epstein, and who aren't they talking about a lot? He began his professional career as a teacher, being hired without a degree at Dalton School. He was teaching calculus and high-level math. So although it doesn't seem that he really had the credentials to be hired as a teacher, he was hired anyway. He grew up in a private gated community in Coney Island. Sounds like he came from privilege. Attended the Courant Institute of Mathematical Sciences at New York University, where he studied mathematical physiology. I mean, this was a smart guy. He was destined for something, clearly. He was only 21 when he started teaching calculus and mathematics at Dalton School. He'd been shown to display inappropriate behavior towards underage female students, so he was already known to be a little bit of a creeper at that time, but obviously he wasn't popped for anything until much later. Epstein joined Bear Stearns in '76 as a low-level junior assistant to a floor trader. That's trading stocks. Moved his way up. I guess he got in some kind of financial trouble, and the thing closed in 2008. He was a consultant for governments. He was working with this guy in the 80s, Stephen Jude Hoffenberg. You ever heard of this guy? He was a CEO of Towers Financial Corporation. Sounds like him and Epstein were involved in some sketchy stuff. Epstein knew John Newton Mitchell, 67th Attorney General of the United States. I mean, look at all the people he knew and mingled with. Are we supposed to go after every one of these people? I mean, maybe we should. But again, who are they focusing on in the news media? One of Epstein's clients was Adnan Khashoggi, Saudi Arabian businessman who was the middleman in transferring American weapons from Israel to Iran as part of the Iran-Contra affair. Now here's someone you have heard of that Epstein has mingled with, and that's Bill Clinton. I asked ChatGPT, how many times did Jeffrey Epstein visit the White House while Bill Clinton was in office? at least 17 times. What was Bill Clinton doing talking to Jeffrey Epstein in the White House? At least 17 times. This was between 93 and 95. Now, this doesn't prove anything, but shouldn't we be looking into this? I mean, do you know anything about any of the conversations that Epstein had with Bill Clinton in the White House? I don't. Sure, most of you have heard of the Lolita Express. That was Jeffrey Epstein's private jet. Now, a lot of people took this jet. There's a lot of people on the logs. Not all of them went to the quote-unquote pedophile island. And we really don't know who and how many people went because of, for various reasons. Cover-ups, redactions, destroyed documents, whatever they want to tell us. We can't verify any of it. But according to flight records obtained and reported by multiple outlets, Clinton's name appears on the jet's official flight manifest at least 26 separate times. Some older sources put the count slightly higher at 27. Clinton's office has stated publicly that he took 4 international trips aboard the plane between 2002 and 2003. Now, I think 2003 was when President Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago for rumors that he was behaving inappropriately around certain women. Some of these trips in connection with the Clinton Foundation, who we've heard a lot about what they've done in Haiti and other places. Lots of sketchy details there. He went to Africa, Europe, Asia, Japan, China, Hong Kong, Norway, Siberia. It's not documented in the available flight logs that Clinton flew to Little St. James Island. That's Pedophile Island. Now, why do we think that Bill Clinton went to quote-unquote Pedophile Island? Well, because victims of Epstein, such as Virginia Jeffrey, claimed he was on the island and I think serviced him as well. And guess what? She's dead. So there's a lot of smoke around Clinton regarding this Epstein thing. But who are you hearing about in the news? You're not hearing about Clinton in connection with Epstein. You know why? Because people who sniff too close to the Clintons end up dead. Look into it. You remember this picture? This is a painting. Look, it's Bill Clinton in a dress. That's supposed to be Monica Lewinsky's dress. You remember when Bill Clinton got in trouble for getting a blowjob in the White House from Monica Lewinsky or whatever, and there was semen on the dress? It's really gross, right? Well, you know who bought this painting? Jeffrey Epstein. He bought it, according to the artist. According to the lady who painted this, Jeffrey Epstein bought this painting. Now, there are rumors that this was hanging in Jeffrey Epstein's house. Why the hell would he buy it, and why the hell would it be hanging in his house? Now, this is disputed. This article, by the way, that you're looking at right now is MSN.com. And they seem to be doing everything they can in this article to convince you that there's lots of doubt that Jeffrey Epstein actually had this. And yet they're not denying it probably because they can't. Probably because the person who wrote this article knows that it's probably true. But just observe the way, again, what does the media want me to believe? And what's the opposing viewpoint? Well, obviously here, the purpose of this article is to make you doubt everything you believe about Clinton's connections to Epstein. That's what it's doing. That's the purpose of it. Now, a lot of this information might be factual, but the opposing viewpoint, and you can check sources and decide how credible they are for yourself. The opposing viewpoint is that, yes, Jeffrey Epstein bought this and it hung prominently in his room. And they're even saying in this article that it's in the files. It's in the released Epstein files that this was seen hanging in a room. They don't say which room or which house it was hanging in. Then I asked ChatGPT, how many times did Trump fly on Jeffrey Epstein's plane? Lolita Express. Flight logs show Trump was listed as a passenger on Epstein's private jet at least 8 times. Ha ha! He's guilty, right? Well, not necessarily. These flights took place well before Trump's presidency and were typically short flights between locations such as Palm Beach, Florida, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C., not to Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. There's no public evidence from the flight logs that Trump flew to Epstein's Little St. James Island. I'm guessing a lot of people took this plane out of convenience, especially at a time where nobody really knew, whether Epstein was involved in any of this diabolical behavior with underage women. I mean, here's the bottom line. When it came to Epstein's relationship to Bill Clinton, you've got a lot more smoke there. You've got international trips going to different countries, quite a few of them, and you've got 17 visits to the White House. I mean, that indicates high-level conversations, probably involving a lot of money. That needs to be looked into. With Lex Wexner, Epstein was very close with him financially. And if the media is not talking about it, well, we shouldn't be talking about it, right? Because we're only supposed to talk about things that the media is shoving in our face, right? Now, some of you might remember this message board called QAnon, which I'm going to blur out the phrase because YouTube likes to censor pages that speak about this organization in anything but a completely negative light. But Bill Maher was one of many, political commentators out there that loved to bash QAnon. And now here's an article of him sort of apologizing about that. Political commentator and host Bill Maher spoke out about the release of the Epstein files. Maher referred to the online movement known as QAnon, which is known for its controversial takes on current issues and conspiracy theories, and said that he believes the group was right about a pedophile ring run by elite people. You see, this is what the media does, and I'm talking about the mainstream media, the media that sort of appoints itself as like the arbiters of truth. Like, what we say is true, and we're neutral, and we're not politically motivated, even though they're obviously way leaning on the left. Anyway, Bill Maher always does this shit. Like, he puts his thumb in the air, he licks his thumb and puts it in the air and goes, oh, which way is the mainstream narrative traveling like a freight train at 100 miles an hour? And the only reason he's saying this now is because it's so clearly obvious that there's fire there with the Epstein situation. And all these years later, now he comes out and says it. He's never ahead of the game. He's always stating the completely obvious after it's already been established as safe to talk about by the mainstream media. He's so full of shit. And he thinks, he can just go out there and proclaim like, okay, well, this is what's true now because I said so. And even if it completely contradicts something he said a few years ago, and if he was sitting here, he'd probably say, well, I have more information now. I'm allowed to change my mind. Yeah, sure. Guy's a paid propagandist. Period. The end. So this guy here on the right, this bald guy, Dave Hayes, who goes by the pen name Praying Medic, he's written several books on the topic of Q. And I would recommend checking them out if you want to know more about it. I made a video about that, and I will link it in the description. And in this video here, which was posted a few days ago, which you can look up if you like, right at about 55 minutes, he explains very clearly, he gives the best explanation I've heard as to why the current administration, the FBI, why there's really not much they can do anymore. And it seems to have to do with the fact of the way it was handled when all of this originally went down. Investigators didn't really do their due diligence. There was a lot of seeming complacency, and even despite Ghislaine Maxwell being put in custody and Jeffrey Epstein being caught and all that, even despite all that, there's just all kinds of problems with the process. One of which was the fact that, according to Dave Hayes, that a lot of the victims were paid off. And apparently Epstein really knew what he was doing when he was messing around with these young girls and went to great lengths to cover his tracks. And that has a lot to do with why the investigation only went so far and has only gone as far as it has today and has not progressed further. So I admit I'm not buying it all. I'm not happy with the way the Trump administration has handled this. But again, I do believe there's a intense narrative warfare going on in America and in the world. This is the Great War, I believe. It's the fight for consensus, or deciding what you and I believe. That's the real war, because instead of blowing people up, the fight is in your mind now. It's about getting people to agree and just doing what you want. It's about mind control. It's always about mind control in the end. I think that's the ultimate war. And the only way to fight against that is to demand the truth and to constantly search for the truth. And you're going to need the help of God above for that. Anyway, we talked about Virginia Giuffre, the one who died, who, famously stated that Bill Clinton was on the island many times and that she had serviced him there, and she ended up dead. Well, here she is with Prince Andrew, who, for a long time, it didn't seem like anything was happening to him. I mean, he was getting reduced in stature. He was being shamed, but I'm sure he was still living it up and drinking good wine and living in a mansion and enjoying his status as a member of the royal family. And I was actually just about to post this, and I was complaining that, well, look, nothing happened to him, but this morning he was just arrested. Former Prince Andrew arrested following Epstein files revelations. So who knows what's going to happen? This may not go anywhere, but it has appeared for some time that Prince Andrew is going to get thrown under the bus, and deservedly so. It would seem. He's going to get thrown to the wolves because there's too much public scrutiny on this issue, this connection with Epstein. So I don't think they're offering up Prince Andrew because they want to do the right thing. I think they're doing it as a result of, pressure. So even though I am very cynical about this whole thing, and I'm kind of tired of hearing about it, in a way, as I said earlier, part of that cynicism has to do with an anger that I think a lot of us have, that it just doesn't seem like anyone's being held accountable. And, abused children and pedophilia, these are things that the mainstream media, if you haven't noticed, they just don't like talking about. The fact that America media doesn't want to talk about it tells me that their stories are dictated, are fed to them by the very individuals that are probably involved with it. There's part of me that's glad that this conversation is out here on the table. Go back 2 years. How much were we hearing about this? I mean, you had your token Prince Andrew story on the cover of a tabloid here and there, but it was kind of like in the same category of Martians from Mars, communicate with, a kid in a basement through his smartphone. So I don't know, maybe we will see a level of accountability going a little further, but not holding my breath. And a final note on, accountability. Whoopi Goldberg was in the news the last couple days because her name appeared in the Epstein files. And she went on this show that she is on, which I believe is called The View, where a bunch of women talk about various subjects, they get political, and they're always left-leaning. And so Whoopi obviously felt like she needed to get out there and say something because she didn't want people to think that, oh, I thought you were this left-leaning, feminist, Trump-hating, the opposite of Trump, whatever. And having her name in the Epstein files makes it look like, oh, wait a minute, you're a hypocrite, So she doesn't want to look like a hypocrite and that she's guilty of something that, God forbid, Trump is guilty of too, which Trump is not guilty of anything involving Epstein, as far as we know, any more than Whoopi Goldberg is. Yes, there are pictures of Trump, as I showed earlier, sort of hanging out with Epstein in Mar-a-Lago, but we also know that Trump banned him from Mar-a-Lago in, I think it was 2003, and that was kind of it. So, I mean, what this Whoopi Goldberg story shows is that, just because someone had a picture with Epstein way back when, or just because someone's name is in the Epstein files, that doesn't mean they're guilty of something. It doesn't mean they're innocent, but you've got to look into it and get the context and do a little bit of research before just jumping to the conclusion that they're absolutely guilty. I mean, Whoopi Goldberg said that her name was in some email sent to someone somewhere. And that's what got her in the Epstein files. You know, there was another group of men that I was reading about who were accused of being involved with Epstein simply because their names appeared in the file. And the reason their names appeared in a file is because they were put in a police lineup where, you know, you have a two-way mirror or whatever those mirrors are called where you can only see through one side. And a victim will look out at a bunch of men and the police will say, okay, point to me the one that did it. And if they see someone familiar, they'll go, oh, that guy right there. So the men that were accused and that were in the lineup were not guilty. They were not pointed out by anyone and they were let go. But just because they got accused, their names were in the file. But these were innocent men. So I'm just saying that it's very important when the media going crazy on a topic and really pushing for you to believe this or that, you've got to be extra discerning. Unless you don't care about the truth. If you don't care about the truth, then just go with it and have fun and enjoy the show.